The fastest learners failed the test that mattered most. Some hornbills learned a stone-dropping task quickly through individual training. Others learned more slowly after watching a human demonstrate the action. Then the apparatus disappeared for 12 months. When it returned, none of the individually trained birds solved the retest, but every bird trained through observation still performed the tool using behavior, the same stone. The same apparatus, the same reward, yet one route produced faster learning, while the other produced behavior that lasted for a year. Why? The answer begins with a task that looked almost too simple to reveal anything important. A hornbill had to move a stone into an opening in a specially designed apparatus. Completing the action correctly released access to a reward, but the researchers were not asking only whether the birds could solve it. They were separating three different questions. Could a hornbill discover a new solution? Could it acquire the behavior after seeing an action? And could the route of learning change what remained much later? The design allowed the researchers to separate the final result from the movement used to achieve it. Two birds could earn the same reward while organizing their actions in different ways. That distinction matters. If success alone were measured, both learning routes might appear equal. By recording how the stone was handled, the experiment could reveal whether observation preserved the demonstrated form of the action, rather than merely helping the birds reach the same endpoint. The year-long delay tested whether those differences were temporary or whether they mattered after the task had been absent. That final question turned a small tool task into a test of durable memory. The hornbills received different kinds of information. Some were shown only the solved outcome. They could see the result after the relevant event, but they did not watch the full movement that produced it. That was not enough. Seeing the completed outcome did not cause the birds to invent the stone-dropping solution on their own. Other hornbills learned through individual reinforcement. Their own actions were rewarded as they moved closer to a successful method. A third group watched a human experimenter demonstrate the action. The demonstrator handled the stone and showed the organized movement used to place it into the apparatus. Both guided learning routes eventually produced success, but the first surprise appeared before the one-year test. The individually trained birds learned faster. Many developed a direct pushing method. Instead of grasping and lifting the stone, they found an efficient way to push it toward or into the opening. The observation-trained birds took longer, but their behavior began to preserve a different structure. They grasped the stone, they lifted it, they positioned it. Then they inserted it using an action resembling the demonstration they had watched. This does not prove that a hornbill understood the demonstration as a human understands instructions. The study measured visible behavior, not hidden thoughts, but the difference in movement was clear. One learning route produced a fast-pushing solution. The other produced a slower grab-and-lift pattern. At that moment, the fast learners appeared to have won. They reached success sooner, their shortcut worked. And both trained groups could complete the task. If the experiment had ended there, the slower method might have looked like an unnecessary imitation of a longer action. But the most important part of the experiment began when the apparatus was taken away. There was no daily practice, no refresher session, no repeated chance to strengthen the behavior. For an entire year, the task was absent. That gap matters because a behavior can look secure while the same objects, rewards, and routines remain nearby. The harder question is what happens after the opportunity disappears, when the apparatus finally returned. The early advantage reversed. None of the individually trained birds solved the retention test. Every observation-trained bird still performed the tool using behavior. The birds that learned more slowly were the ones succeeded 12 months later. But even this result needs careful wording. A failed retest does not prove that every trace of an earlier experience has vanished. The individually trained birds may have recognized parts of the situation. They may have retained some memory without reconstructing the action during the test. Researchers could not directly observe everything the birds remembered. Understood or intended, they could measure performance. After 12 months, one learning pathway produced a behavior that remained available. The other did not produce the same result. So what might observation have added? The demonstration did more than reveal where the stone needed to end up. It displayed an organized sequence: grasp, lift, position, and prist. That sequence linked several movements into one recognizable action. The researchers suggest that observing organized action may help consolidate a novel behavior into a more durable form. In simple terms, the watching birds may have learned not only the destination, but also a structured route to reach it. That explanation fits the result, but it remains an interpretation. The study could compare learning speed, motor patterns, and later performance. It could not open a window into the bird's private experience. The strongest conclusion is therefore precise. The way the Hornbills learned was associated with both the form of their tool use and its long-term retention. That is more informative than simply calling the birds clever. And it leads to a larger question. A useful discovery can appear once and disappear with the individual that made it. For a behavior to remain stable within a group, other animals may need to notice it. They may need to preserve important parts of the action, and the behavior may need to survive long gaps when the same tool or opportunity is absent. This experiment did not demonstrate that complete chain. It was not one hornbill deliberately teaching another. The demonstrator was a human experimenter. The study did not show the behavior spreading through a wild flock. It did not show knowledge passing from parents to offspring. And it did not demonstrate cumulative culture, where behaviors are preserved and progressively improved across generations. Those limits do not weaken the study, they protect the real finding from exaggeration. The researchers cautiously connected action-based observation with durable tradition-like behavior. That phrase does not mean that a complete animal tradition was observed. Long-term retention may be one condition that helps a socially learned behavior remain stable, but one condition is not the whole process. A lasting tradition would require evidence that behavior moves between individuals and continues over time. This study isolated one smaller but necessary question. Can the route into a behavior affect whether that behavior is still performed much later? For these hornbills, it did. The unexpected result was not merely that observation worked. It was that the slower route produced the stronger long-term performance. The individually trained birds found an efficient solution quickly. The observation-trained birds took longer and preserved more of the demonstrated movement. A year later, only the observation-trained group solved the retest. The finding does not erase the difference between animal skill and human knowledge, language, moral responsibility, or civilization. It shows something narrower and measurable. How an animal learns can influence how its behavior is organized and whether that behavior remains available after a long interval. And now the experiment raises a new puzzle. When several animals perform the same useful behavior, are they each discovering similar solutions independently? Or are they preserving a particular action by watching others? During the first test, those possibilities may look almost identical. Both can place the stone in the opening, both can produce the same reward, but after months without practice, the route to success may leave a different kind of behavioral trace. That question could shape future studies. Researchers could test whether demonstrations preserve complex movements better than reinforcement alone. They could examine whether one animal can pass an action to another. They could ask which parts of a behavior remain stable and which parts change as it moves through a group. They could also test whether the behavior survives after the original demonstrator is gone. Every step would require new evidence. Nothing in this study proves those later possibilities in advance. If you value evidence-based documentaries that separate measured results from speculation, subscribe to Almost Human Science. Because this is exactly where a careful experiment becomes larger than the apparatus that produced it. The fastest learners won the first part. They solved the task sooner and discovered an efficient shortcut. But the slower learners won the test that came a year later. Their behavior survived a long period without practice and returned when the apparatus came back. A stone can solve a problem once. Mirren allows the solution to return. And observation may help connect the two. For the deeper question of whether an animal discovery could become lasting knowledge across a group, watch the related documentary on screen now. Because intelligence is not only the ability to find a solution, sometimes the greater challenge is not losing it.